Changing My Diet to Lower My Carbon Footprint by Josephine Croston. My first task was cutting out meat / becoming a vegetarian. I was successful with eating no meat. It didn't change the way I felt or really ate. All you have to do is cut out the meat of your everyday food choices, which is pretty simple. By not eating meat, I lowered my carbon footprint as well as lowered pollution emissions that contaminate streams, rivers, and oceans. I also reduced pollution production from livestock farms because of the animal waste runoff into waterways, as well as infiltrate aquatic ecosystems. Finally, I reduced air pollution because by cutting out meat, the system that takes place of plant to animal energy, which creates CO2 release, which I don't take part in anymore. A source that I used for learning about vegetarianism is from Sharon Palmer. I learned that analysis exhibits that adopting certainly one of 14 widespread sustainable dietary patterns, such as vegetarianism or veganism, may lead to reductions as excessive as 80% of GHGs and land use and 50% of water use. The reduction has been largely proportional to the deployment of animal-based meals restrictions. The article that I found was a Google Scholar article, which was peer-reviewed with a lot of citations, up to date, and it was a scientific journal entry. My second task was eating whole foods, meaning not processed, while still being vegetarian. This task was a little harder just because of the grocery shopping and meal prepping. I was still buying packaged foods, but I had to research what foods aren't processed, which resulted in me having a very limited selection to choose from. By eating non-processed foods, you are not giving into the harmful system that those foods go through to get made. Processed foods take such a strain on our natural resources. All the packaging of these foods, as well as create so much waste. 80% of global agricultural greenhouse gas emissions come from processing and packaging food. This practice also is a contributing factor to global land clearing and species extinction. By eating a healthy diet that consists of unprocessed foods, could have the result of reaching 50% potential to reduce GHG emission and lessen land use. And the source to help me find out about whole foods and not eating unprocessed foods was Sustainable Diets from the Sage Journals. I learned that the most common environmental issues in the food industry are related to food processing loss, food wastage, and packaging energy efficiency, transportation of foods, water consumption, and waste management among the foods processed and produced. This article was found in Google Scholar. It is a peer-reviewed article with a lot of citations, up to date, and as well as a scientific journal entry. My third task was going vegan. It was difficult to realize that a lot of foods that I ate weren't vegan, but it made me eat more vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. Not only did it make me feel good physically, but mentally because I knew it was good for the planet. Going vegan significantly reduces your carbon footprint. Cutting out meat and dairy alone decreases your carbon intake, but with also lessening the amount of packaged foods, reduces pollution because of the packaging and transportation of goods is a huge contributor to air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. So by reducing intake of those foods, you aren't giving into an unsustainable practice. The source that helped me learn about going vegan was from Chai Bingley Clark. I learned that it is expected that by 2050, milk and meat production will increase by 58 to 73%. Respectively, concerns about animal welfare have been an issue for centuries. But climate change and greenhouse gas emissions have recently started to become a point of interest. Modern food systems, especially the agricultural sector, have a highly unstable impact on the environment. This article was found on Google Scholar. It was peer-reviewed with a lot of citations, up to date, and a scientific journal entry. My task 4 was cutting out sugar. I had to get rid of all processed and packaged foods, which meant I had to eat whole and raw foods. I felt great. I just had to make everything homemade and be aware of ingredients. By cutting out added sugar from my diet, I am reducing the amount of CO2 produced as well as cutting down on water and land usage. In my research, it says how sugar mills are huge producers of pollution and creates huge loss in native ecosystems. With reducing sugar consumption, we could also increase bioethanol production without causing food insecurity, which bioethanol is a renewable energy that is also common fuel type used in cars, machines, and for many more things. Sugar mills have also been proven to contaminate water supply and create a hazardous environment in surrounding areas. In conclusion, by cutting out added sugar, you are lessening pollution, land, water, and CO2 produced in usage, which benefits the environment. The article that helped me learn about sugar intake in mills was the impact of sugar mills' influence on environment around mills area. I learned that a large quantity of water is during the sugar manufacturing processes, and as a result, sugar mills discharge a large amount of water waste. The discharge effluents were mixed with different chemicals during the process. It was a Google Scholar article, peer-reviewed with a lot of citations, up to date, and it was a scientific journal entry. My task 5 was eating all from a farmer's market. It was fun but less convenient since it's not open every day. I had to plan all my meals so I knew I was getting enough food to last a whole week. But overall, I loved going there, and the food was so good and healthy for the environment. I found that buying foods from farmers markets is beneficial to the environment because it is one way to achieve a sustainable agricultural system. A huge issue on our environment is land usage, pollution from pesticides, and deforestation. With farmers markets, they avoid these issues because of how they are locally grown. So it's a small independent farm. By eating and going to farmers markets, you are eating from well-sourced, environmentally sustainable food supplies. You are lowering your carbon footprint, lessening pollution, and giving back to your community. By funding local communities, it is saving forests and mass land usage, which could be preserved for wildlife. The article that helped gain me knowledge about farmers markets was Farmers Markets, Consuming Local Rural Produce. I learned that creating farmers markets where people can buy produce from local farmers and growers reduces the distance that food travels between producers and consumers, which in turn decreases global environmental pollution. It was a Google Scholar article, peer-reviewed with a lot of citations, up to date, and a scientific journal entry. My task 6 was eating a sustainable amount of food and not in excess. I was really aware of my proportions and made sure I made food for the correct amount of people eating it. If I made too much food, I just ate it as a leftover, so I wasn't overeating on other foods as well. I found that a lot of pollution and non-sustainable practices from agriculture is from high consumption rates. With Americans being one of the highest consumers in the world, that means a lot of waste and extra caloric intake for our citizens. Packaging and food going to waste. Having our farmers need to expand to keep up with the picking of crops, wasting land, deforesting land, and needing more food plants and tools to gather foods is creating huge and unnecessary amounts of pollution for an unnecessary amount of food to manufacture. With eating whole foods and lowering the amount of food bought, we can lessen the amount of waste and agricultural pollution that is harmful to the environment. Therefore, by eating a correct amount and not overbuying and consuming, we can slow deforestation, climate change, lower pollution emission, and decrease land usage. The article that helped me learn about consumption rates is Environmental Impacts of Food Consumption and Nutrition. Where are we and what is next? I learned that investigating the energy and water consumption and the greenhouse gas emissions from different diets in the U.S. population, reducing caloric intake to the recommended levels reduce the impacts of energy and water use as well as climate. While the change of the diet to the 2010 USDA dietary guidelines led to an increase of energy use by 38%, blue water footprint by 10%, and GHG emission by 6%. In my seventh task, which was no waste, it was easy when you write down all your recipes but have them with similar ingredients. I know that I like the same breakfast and lunch, but I made sure my dinner ingredients could also be snacked on and used up. I didn't let anything go to waste, and I ate everything I bought for the week. In my research, I found out that by living a non-wasteful diet, I am lowering my carbon footprint as well as eating sustainably. There's a huge problem in our country with consumption and waste levels. With using all the food and not letting any go to waste, I am helping the major issue of agricultural waste production, which that issue is a huge contributor to pollution, which impacts climate change and land loss. With the cut back on my buying of food, I am lessening the amount of trash I produce as well as making myself not need to produce large amounts on a weekly basis, which is letting me live a low pollution emitting lifestyle and eating sustainably. The source that helped me find out about no waste was Relationship Between Food Waste, Diet Quality, and Environmental Sustainability. I learned that a biophysical simulation model was used to estimate the amount of cropland associated with wasted food. This analysis finds that the U.S. consumers wasted 422 G's of food per person daily, with 30 million acres of cropland used to produce this food every year. This accounts for 30% of daily calories available for consumption. This article was on Google Scholar, peer-reviewed with a lot of citations, up to date, and a scientific journal entry. This graph shows the difference of dieting and lifestyles with the difference of carbon emission levels. As you can see, vegan is one of the lowest emissions of CO2 levels. Then it goes to non-dairy, then vegetarian, and then meat and partially plant-based foods, all the way down to meat partially replaced by dairy products, which is on the higher end of emissions. My key takeaways from this assignment was being vegetarian lowers your carbon footprint, lowers greenhouse emissions, air pollution, deforestation, and slows climate change. Eating a non-processed food diet also lowers your carbon footprint, lowers greenhouse emissions, air pollution, deforestation, and slows climate change. Being vegan lowers your carbon footprint, lowers greenhouse emissions, air pollution, deforestation, and slows climate change. Cutting out added sugars does the same as well as lessens water usage. Buying from a farmer's market does the same and gives back to your local community. Eating in proportion and not in excess does the same. And eating without creating waste does the same.